لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. يداك. يداكي. استغفر الله.
لا يداك يدائي.
Allah المستعان. I gave you the answer and you still get it wrong. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد. So in continuing inshallah ta'ala where we left off regarding the tafsir of surah al-baqarah, where we were speaking about the results of that which occurred with the Yahud because of the hardness of their hearts as a result of their disobedience and their false sense of courage towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in disobeying His commands. When Allah mentions that their hearts had become hard like stone, or even worse than this. And this is when a person's heart, for example, becomes accustomed to disobedience of Allah Azza wa Jal until the heart becomes hardened. When the heart is hardened, then it's very difficult for his heart to receive guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor does it fear Allah Azza wa Jal, nor does it benefit from the reminder when it's given. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the reality of the munafiqeen of the Yahud and how when they would go among the believers, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا, when they would be with the believers, they would say that we believe. So they will show apparent actions of Iman, verbally and by way of their actions. وَإِذَا خَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ, but when some of them went back to the others, i.e. the munafiqeen of the Yahud went back to the Yahud, who were not from the munafiqeen of them, and they'll mention أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ, and we mentioned فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ here, بِمَا حَكَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ, that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has judged among you, i.e. you're going to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions and affirming that you are the Prophet, a messenger has been described within our book, the Torah. So you're establishing the proof against us. Because of your rejecting of this, you're saying basically that us of the Yahud, we don't believe this. But we know it's in the book, it's in the Torah, but you're basically going, affirming that which has been judged against us, what we're going to be held accountable for. Because we know, yet we are still rejecting. The description of the Prophet Muhammad was known to them in the Torah. But those of the munafiqeen of them, when they would sit with the Prophet Muhammad and his companions, affirming Iman for their personal gain. But then when they will go back to the Yahud, they say, we're not believers, inna ma'akum. We was just ridiculing them. But rather the joke is upon them, right? Why? Because they are establishing the proof against themselves. That's what after Allah mentions, أَوَلَا يَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ. Do they not know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that which they conceal and that which they make apparent? Now, that Islam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that which they conceal and that which is made apparent. I.e. there's no action that a person does except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of the hypocrites. Those who portray Islam, but within themselves they what? What do? They hide kufr. Okay, what is hypocrisy? What is nifaq? Ma huwa nifaq?
When you show something on the outside, but it's not in the inside.
Now, وَالْإِظْهَارُ مَا لَيْسَ فِي الْبَاطِنِ is to make that which is apparent opposite to what you conceal. That which you show is not what is within. Now, a person, they come, they pray in the masjid and the likes, but they have an agenda. And unfortunately this happens. Where a person will come, they'll be among the Muslims, but they hide their kufr. Maybe they're a spy, maybe they're trying to cause fitna in the community, whatever it is. A person may feel like they get away with it in this life, but who knows what they're doing? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The worst is to be a hypocrite as a Muslim. I'm talking an-nifaq al-akbar, the major hypocrisy, where a person is a disbeliever and they hide it for a particular benefit, whether it's a spy or whatever they are. Why is this the worst? Because that person is establishing the proof on themselves. As Muslims, we don't care about this life. This life is irrelevant. So when you're busying yourself, being a hypocrite among the Muslims, worrying about matters of this life, our concern is what? The hereafter. Now what is your concern as the hypocrite? This life. So you're constantly establishing the proof on yourself every day, pretending to be a Muslim, further establishing the hujjah against yourself, that when you come before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would you have a case to argue? Will you? La. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was well aware of what he was doing. Yes, you concealed it from the believers, but who knows? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah mentions وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. See, there are those who say they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the last day. These are the two most important components of Iman. Why? Why is Iman in Allah and Iman in the last day so important? Now, but there's, out of the 6 pillars of Iman, why these two are the most important? Think. لا تستعجلوا بالإجابة. Because look, in the many times, the Prophet says in a hadith, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليفعل كذا وكذا, do this, do that, do this. Here, ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين. What is the significance of al-iman billah wal-iman bil-yawm al-akhir?
Would it make you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have taqwa?
Why?
Because you know that you're gonna be accounted. The day's gonna come where you're gonna be accounted for everything that you do.
Good. Closer. When you answer, yeah, I want you to imagine you're giving da'wah. Like the person you're answering, even the person they don't know the answer. So you give a full answer. Because you'll be asked these questions. What's so important about belief in Allah and the last day? Why is that important? Why does in Surah Al-Fatiha, when Allah has split it into 2 halves, the first thing is to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he says what? Maliki Yawm al-Din. It goes to where? The hereafter. Yawm al-Akhir. And then it's divided between the servant and Allah Azza wa Jal. But before the first part of Surah Al-Fatiha, Fatiha is what? Wasf or Sifatullah Azza wa Jal, description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then from that description, Maliki Yawm al-Din. So you learn about Allah and you learn that He's the owner of the day of judgment, the last day. So what's so important about these two matters of Iman? Man i'tarafa bihaqqillah abaduh. And abadahu. Whoever acknowledges the rights of Allah Azza wa Jal properly will worship Allah. Now, And this is all in summary, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. When a person knows the meaning of inna lillah, this is al-iman billah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maliku kulli shay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala khaliqu kulli shay. Wa huwa al-razzaq. Wa huwa al-mudabbir. Allah Azza wa Jal is the owner of all things. For him is the true dominion, the creator of all things. Now, he's the one who puts all of the things in their proper affairs, in the correct order. This is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ نَحْنُ مُسَخَّرْ لِلَّهِ. We are at the service of Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah does what He wills with us. نَحْنُ نَمْشِي بِقَدْرِ اللَّهِ. We move with the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. يوم الآخر. Yani that's the reality of this life. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Yani we came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah created us. And throughout this life, until when? We go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, Iman billah. That's what's required from you. Knowing that you came from Allah Azza wa Jal. And you're an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Iman bil Yawm al-Akhir, knowing you're going to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To be held accountable for how you lived in this life. And we always, I love to recite these ayat often. In the surah al-Nazi'at, where it mentions, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. These ayat, they always remind you of this reality. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. That's what? Iman billah. How can you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear standing before Allah if you don't know Allah Azza wa Jalla? Is it possible? You're going to truly fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala haqqa tuqati? La, it's not going to happen. Now, وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. Why do you prevent yourself from your desires? What is the factor that encourages you to do so? What's that motive? Why should you prevent yourself from following desires? Because fear of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Fear of the Yawm al-Akhir, the last day. That's what matters the most. So you understand Allah's right upon you, that He's the one who deserves worship. So you submit, you make changes, knowing that you're going to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be held accountable. That day, alimat nafsum ma qaddamat wa akharat. That day when a person will know what they brought forth and what they left behind. And you'll know everything. You'll know the actions you have done, whether it's good or bad, and you'll know the actions you didn't do, that you're supposed to do. The salah you're in debt of, the siyam you're in debt of, the oppression you didn't rectify. You will be in debt. In some situations, if you don't rectify them in this life, you'll be made aware of that debt. It will become clear to you. The smallest oppression that you forgot about, you'll be aware of. That's the severity of that day. So when a person reminds themselves of having true belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also the last day, then we are aware that we're going to return to Allah Azza wa Jalla to be held accountable for how we lived in this life. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then goes on to talk about the Yahud. And there are two categories of the Yahud that He mentions here. When He mentions, وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابَ إِلَّا أَمَانِيَّ وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ لِيَشْتَرُوا بِهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا فَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا كَتَبَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا يَكْسِبُونَ. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and from them, in the English rendering which meaning, are those who are ummiyun. Al-ummi is the one who does not read or write. But what's significant about this in this situation? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam kind of ummiyan. He couldn't read nor could he write. That's why when the wahi came to him, Jibreel said to him, Iqra, he said, Ma ana biqari. I'm not able to read. You see? So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam couldn't read or write. And that's also why the Quran is evident of his prophethood. Someone who can't read or write brought the Quran? Because it's wahy from Allah Azza wa Jal. But again, from the Yahud were those who could not read and write. And you had the scribes from them also. But the worst in this situation, those who, in this situation, they could not read or write. لا يعلمون الكتاب. Here, لا يعلمون الكتاب, لا يعلمون التوراة. They did not understand or know their book that was revealed to them. إلا أماني وإنهم إلا يظنون. Except for things that they made assumptions of. That which they interpreted themselves. They said, yeah. And they hoped that it would be there from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They made their own hopes and ambitions of what the book from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had contained, but they had not read it, nor did they understand it. So this was false hope that they had. Now these people, was mentioned, لا يعلمون الكتاب لا يدرون ما فيه. They don't know what it actually contains. That's like a person who's a Muslim saying Allah says this and this, but he's never read the Quran. He doesn't even know, even he may have read in Arabic, but he doesn't understand the word of it. But he's saying Allah said this, Allah said this. Allah's promised this, Allah's threatened this. But all of this is from their own self, their own assumptions. And they will call to this, they will teach this. This is the amani that they had. These false hopes and interpretations, these fabrications, these lies that they made based upon ignorance. Now, the Prophet Muhammad mentioned in the hadith, "Inna ummatun ummiyatun, la naktubu wa la nahsub." That mentions we are a nation that cannot read or write. Now, nor were we known for calculating. Now, yani ash-shahru hakadha wa hakadha wa hakadha. The month is like this, like this, like this. So it's mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim. So it mentions لا نفتقر في عباداتنا ومواقيتها إلى كتاب ولا حساب. It mentions in order for us to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we're not in need of writing nor calculating. This is from wahy. Everything's done based upon revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the fact we couldn't read or write did not disable us from worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. So also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم. Allah is the one who sent among those who could not read and write a messenger from them, i.e. who was also like them. And in that situation, it's even more of an encouragement to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that the messenger was just like you, could not read and write, but yet he's come with this perfect speech. And that's because this is not authored by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is revelation. You see? And that's the significance of the Quran. It's not penmanship. It's not authored by man. And that's why the challenge has been significant from Yawm al-Qiyamah. From Yawm al-Ba'ath wa Yawm al-Inzal al-Quran ila Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's the significance of this revelation from the time the Prophet Muhammad was sent until the Day of Judgment. If we look at the level of Arabic, even among the not Arab learners in the Arab speaking world, and compare the level of language today to 500 years ago, there is a major difference. There's a big decline. And it's like you have to search for scholars of Arabic, i.e. those who are proficient to that level of the Arabic language. And even then, the scholar of Arabic today, compared to 500 plus years ago, is going to be what? A major difference. So as we get further away from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, the level of the Arabic language is getting what? Weaker. Because this was a concern at the time of the Sahaba. When they were conquering and many people were embracing Islam that were not from Arab-speaking countries, what was the concern? Misunderstanding Islam because they didn't know the Arabic language. So imagine today. And Allah Musta'an, today we're in a dangerous time. You have these people that, Allah Musta'an, they present themselves as scholars now, and they will quote a verse of the Quran and make their own istinbat. Istinbat means when you derive the rulings, the ahkam, the legislation from the sources of revelation. To say the ruling of this, is halal, is haram, is bid'ah, is sunnah, because the hadith is this, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this. But you have now people giving their own interpretation, their own rulings, without going back to people of knowledge. This is among the Muslims. The more we distance from the language of the Quran, everyone wants to learn Arabic now, but they want to learn how to speak. I want to learn to speak Arabic. I want to be fluent. Okay, why? And you'll see this person doesn't even like to talk in the first place anyway. He's not social. The person doesn't want to talk to no one. Why would I speak Arabic for? Why you learn how to understand the Quran in Arabic, understand Hadith? Maybe there's people, they can understand the Quran and the Sunnah in Arabic, but they can't speak a word of it. They know the meanings, but their tongue is not, they haven't practiced. There's some people, they understand, but they cannot speak. But now we have people, they want to speak, learn dialect, but as for preserving the Quran and Sunnah, it's difficult. I'rab, Allah musta'an. You go Arab countries, you mention Arab, they're like, akhi, please. Some places they don't want to hear it, akhi. It brings back childhood trauma. You see? But this is why it's key. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala educated the ummah of Islam by the Quran and the Sunnah. It made them develop. They learned reading and writing. The motive for it was the Quran and the Sunnah. To understand the Quran, you had to learn. The best people were those who taught the Quran and preserved it. And teaching the Quran includes teaching them how to read it, how to recite it correctly, tafseer, how to understand it. You have to read and write to really access this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored the Muslims, and the Quran and the Sunnah was a primary source of education. Primary source of education. But imagine we are behaving like some of the Jews who couldn't read or write, but then they will speak about their religion without any knowledge. They don't understand anything in the Torah. They didn't know anything. But they will say, Allah has said this, 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 this. And now some of us do the same thing. Or we want to come with something new. Everybody wants to be a personality now, isn't it? So everyone wants to bring their own, something new that's going to make the followers go, ching, 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 ching. And Allah preserve us. I see one, I used to consider this person a person of knowledge. Now they start to say some crazy things. Saying some crazy things. To a point now, this is where you have to worry about people. In the Muslim community, men, when they become advocates for women. When men become advocates for women, this is a major sign of a red flag. Because didn't Islam teach us the rights of women? But when I say the advocates of women, they start to go above and beyond. One started saying a woman can ask for a mahar every year, a new mahar. This is the most recent thing that I heard. Allah musta'an. A person said a woman can ask for a new mahar every year. Do you know what I saw in the comments? A non-Muslim woman saying, we need to save the sheikh, we need to preserve him. This is what it's come to. We have to be careful, wallahi, we have to be careful. That we start to behave like the Yahud. That we speak about Islam and we say things that is not in Islam. And it's to gain attention. And it's to win people's hearts. La, we don't do this. Abadan. We say the haqq, even if it's against our own selves. That's the reality. We cannot behave like those whom Allah has warned us about. That is one group of them. Now, Allah says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ لِيَشْتَرُوا بِهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا فَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا كَتَبَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا يَكْسِبُونَ. This is the second type of people. So the first group of the Yahud, they could not read them right. But they would say, Allah said this. They would speak without any knowledge. Then you have those who were the scribes. The scribes of the Yahud. And they will write things with their own hands and say this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who do you think they're telling this to? Who are they saying this is from Allah to? Al-Ummiyun. Those who couldn't read and write. So again, those who have that skill of reading and writing, what do? They take advantage of the ignorant. They enslave them. Become reliant upon them. It happened within the West for a number of years. For so long, a group of people could say, so and so is off the sunnah, and everyone would say, yep, they spoke the truth, they know. But now, alhamdulillah, more young people started to go abroad and study in Islamic universities and sit with scholars. More people started to learn the Arabic language, started to have access to people of knowledge, and started to learn that no, it's not that black and white. And no, there's more people of knowledge that you can refer to, senior as well, that are not going to tell you the same thing. So we no longer need to what? Blind follow when you have the ability not to do so. And when it comes to blind following, we can't be like these people. They blind follow in every single situation. Everything they blind follow. But as Muslims, we know what we blind follow and what we don't blind follow in. For example, you're a new Muslim, you don't know how to pray. Who are you going to blind follow? The Imam. You don't know how to make wudu, you're going to blind follow the Imam. You ask him, how do you make wudu? He's going to show you, and you say, yeah, I accept that. You're not going to say, what's your evidence? You just became Muslim yesterday. What do you know about evidence? You learn if you went to the wrong Imam, you go to a Masjid al-Sunnah a couple of years later, and say, Akhi, you told you to make wudu like that. You don't wipe the back of your neck. Like, what do you mean? I've been doing this for 3 years, Akhi. The Imam taught me that. Which Imam? No, come on, this is how you do it. What do you mean? Yeah, now this is the evidence. What evidence? That's when it starts. You see? But this is the danger when a person is jahil, whether it's intentional or unintentional, the access to knowledge becomes limited, it's restricted. But once you tread that path, subhanAllah, it opens doors for you. Not only do you no longer blind follow, you also become merciful. If you truly attain knowledge properly. Because you understand, for example, it's not only my way. The clearest evidence is the A'immat al-Arba'a, the 4 Imams. The issue we have of the madahib today is only blind following. That's the issue. The only reason a Hanafi is going to have beef with a Hanbali or a Shafi'i is based on blind following. Loyalty to the madhab. Some has become like gangs. Like Croydon versus Fulton Heath. There's beef. Now my Imam. But if you understand this interpretation of evidence, it's ijtihad. And you'll see they agree in many things, and there's only small things, there's a few things they differ in. Okay, how do we deal with the differences? When you learn and have knowledge, what happens? You look at the case. So this madhab says the ruling is based on this is the evidence. The other one says this is the evidence. You have the tools now, what do? You study the evidence presented. And it's not what evidence agrees with the Imam, it's what Imam agrees with the evidence. That's the way it has to be, not the other way around. We cannot say the Sunnah agrees with the Imam. We say the Imam agrees with the Sunnah. Or that which is mentioned in the Quran. That's the standard, the Quran and the Sunnah. That's what comes first. That's what came first in the beginning. The madhab was what? A medium to understand the evidences. And we see, for example, someone who doesn't have the equipped to study, then you're going to blind follow your local madhab. That's just the reality. Until you have the ability to look into the evidences presented. I bought a book recently, and it's because one of my friends who's more Maliki, he's a Maliki. Maliki? MashaAllah. Do you know this book is Uyun al-Adillah? I'll show you. It's by a Maliki Sheikh, but he's from the Baghdad region. It's a nice book. You see, when you learn Arabic, you have access to things. In English, there's no access. You know, since Brexit, when you go to the airport, it has UK and other nationalities. You know, the other nationalities queue is always long. That's the non-Arabic speakers. Non-Arabic is other nationalities now. The queue is long, actually. The access is denied, bro. But when it comes to when you have Arabic, subhanAllah, you have access. This book, he looks at the differences between the A'immatul Fuqaha, and he looks at the evidence presented. And he's Maliki, he says, within the Maliki method, this is our evidence, this is how we present our case. So you learn how to look at how they derive the ruling from the evidence, how they present, how they got to where they got to. That's when you start to enjoy fiqh. I'm not going to lie, fiqh can be very boring when someone just says, do this, you're like, okay, no problem. You won't actually taste the sweetness of fiqh. But when you're looking at, okay, how did they get this ruling from this evidence? Sometimes you'll see evidence, you'll be like, what was the relationship? But when they break it down, you're like, subhanAllah, I would never have known. Because there's certain tools that you have to equip yourself with that give you access to this. The Muslim should never be satisfied with ignorance. Even if you're doing a little by little to try and attain that increase in knowledge, just don't be satisfied to be ignorant. You say ignorance is bliss, not in Islam. Ignorance isn't a good life. I remember, for example, I used to play basketball, you used to go driving to Cornwall, imagine. I didn't know you can shorten and combine the salah. I'm stressing like, Allah musta'an. It's long, and then you have to pray. And it's like, obviously, those days, ignorance. When you stop and praying Dhuhr and Asr, maybe Maghrib if it's 6 hours in the winter, and you're praying 4, and then 3, you're like, this is long, man. Then years down the lane, you learn, you can pray 2 and 2. The relief is like, you know, sometimes in English, you're going to say, I'm so dumb. You say these statements, I'm so dumb. If only I knew. But it's like, that's when you realize ignorance isn't bliss. It's not a good thing to be ignorant in all cases. Like, there are some things where it's like, okay, yeah, Hamza, I don't know that. I don't need to know that. Min husn Islam tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. And from the best of a person's Islam is leaving things that don't concern him. There are some things that we don't need to know. And the reality for us now is politics. We don't really need to know politics. I gave up reading the news, listening to news a long time ago. But everything that I need to know, it comes to me. Someone tells you, Aki, you know there's a voucher now that you can get for gas or something. I didn't have to look at the news for that. Someone's going to tell you. Because what happens, you go on the news and you start to see everything that makes you depressed. And it's like, okay, can I do anything about it? La. Was it better that I didn't know? Yes. You should make dua for the well-being of everyone anyway. I don't need to watch the news to do that. I should ask Allah to rectify the affairs of the Muslims everywhere, in general. Because what happens? I'm supposed to memorize Quran. I go to my dars, the Sheikh says, why don't you memorize your page? I said, Sheikh, I'm depressed, man. The news, akhi. The Sheikh, that's a reasonable excuse? The news. Stop you memorizing Quran. Allah musta'an. This is the problem. So we have to know that which is beneficial knowledge and that which is not beneficial knowledge. But again, we cannot be like the Yahud. Those who would say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which has no source of revelation. Rather, those who did not know how to read and write, did not have any knowledge of the Torah, they will speak without knowledge. Then you had those who had the ability to write, they will conceal knowledge from the people. And they will write and say this is from Allah. And they will do business with it. They will do business. And these are the ones you have to also be careful. Those who use the religion as a vessel to make money off the ignorant. You have people like this. Someone will tell you, I've unlocked a level of spirituality that none of you have witnessed in the last 100 years. They say something like, I spent 100,000 studying and pursuing this knowledge. And I found a way to give it to everyone only for £1,000. What happens? The Jahil Muslim who's been sinning so long, say, yes man, time of Tawbah has come. The best way I can make Tawbah is spend £1,000. That's the first victim. The sinful one that wants to make Tawbah. Then you have the one who's depressed. And this person in the advert says, I guarantee you happiness. All you need to do is sign up for my course. £1,000. And because you don't know, I can tell you how to be happy for free, akhi. That's the reality. If you give me £1,000, that's from you, alhamdulillah, but I won't charge you, akhi. I'll tell you for free. You want to be happy? Then go to the Quran, akhi. You're depressed. Go to the Quran. Read the Quran properly. You know, when I say read the Quran, I remember one of our teachers, he mentioned, subhanAllah, he said, look, this person said, I read like 3 juz or so a day. He said, okay, how long did it take you to read 3 juz? He said, maybe an hour and a half. He said, okay, I want you to try something. Don't read 3 juz in the hour and a half. Read 10 pages. 3 juz, 3 ajaza, in thalath ajaza, is equivalent to 60 pages of the Quran. He said, read just 10 pages instead. Okay, 1/6 of the portion that he was reading. He said, read 10 pages, but I want you to ponder over those 10 pages. Every ayah, stop, reflect, look at the tafseer. Understand those 10 pages. And then see the difference between you doing that with 10 pages versus just reading 60 pages of the Quran in an hour and a half. No doubt you're going to get rewards for what? Every letter you read, 60 pages, a lot of reward. But the reward that will come with actually pondering over the Quran, because not only do you get the reward of reading, you're going to read it a number of times as well, you're going to repeat. You're also going to get the impact of the Quran. How the Quran affects you. That will encourage you to act upon the Quran. So not only do you get the reward of reading it, you get the reward of acting upon it. Because some of us, if our only concern is to read, what happens to the action? And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam قال القرآن شفيعا إن القرآن شفيع لأصحابه أو يأتي قرآن يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه. The Quran will come on the day of judgment as an interceder for its companions. To be a companion of something, like would you say this person is your companion? They see you every day, but they say, yeah, he wears brown phobe today, green phobe tomorrow. That's it. Would you say that's a companion? No. But if someone tells you, yes, he gets upset because this happens, he's happy when this happens, he likes, this is his favorite food, he doesn't like to eat this, you're going to say this is a what? A companion. Because he knows this person, knows detailed knowledge, not just surface. Sometimes if I'm just reading Quran, I'm only getting the surface benefit of the Quran. My heart's going to be softened from the remembrance of Allah Azza wa Jal, and I'm going to get the reward for every letter that I read. But when I ponder over the Quran, for example, some of us, we may have read these ayat all the time, where Allah is speaking about the Yahud, but we don't actually know how to put it into practice. How do I take these ayat, speaking about a generation that no longer exists, i.e. the people of Musa والسلام, and the mistakes they made, how do I now reflect that into my life? How do I bring that relation into practice? That happens with tafsir. That happens when you ponder over the Quran. So then I no longer only get a surface benefit. You start to say, okay, now I've learned about a people that Allah has informed me of that used to exist. They made certain mistakes. They went through a similar process that we went through. The Prophet Muhammad was sent to this ummah as Musa was sent to the ummah that preceded. Okay? What was the consequence of those believed and the consequence of those who disbelieved? The same is going to happen. History repeats itself. That statement doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from people looking at history and seeing that there's a pattern. Where do we have that history? In the Quran. Go to Surah Hud. Go to Surah A'raf. Read these chapters of the Quran and look at the stories of the prophets. And what did the prophets say to their people? They all said the same thing. Ya qawmi i'badu rabbakum or i'badu Allah ma lakum min ilahin ghayru. They're going to say the same thing to all of their people. Worship your Lord, worship Allah. You don't have a deity other than Him. Then from that was the initial call. That's how Allah started their story, especially in Surah Hud. Allah started the story like this, when this one said to his people, the same thing. Then from there you saw what? What did you learn about? The response. How did the people respond? That is da'wah. This life is two things. Al-da'wah wal-ijaba. The call and the response. The call to Islam and the response is either acceptance or rejection. Okay, what's for those who accept and what's the consequence of those who reject? What's the characteristics of those who accept versus the characteristics of those who reject? Where can we learn all of this? In the Quran. A person embraced Islam, was jahil, 30 years of their life in haram, doing many things haram, displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Within 5 years, they've been a devoted Muslim. What do you see? A new person. If you ask that person, did you change intentionally? They say no. I embraced Islam. Okay, why are you the person you are today? I just followed what I learned of Islam. Whatever I learned, I implemented it. So what do you see? You'll see a person 5 years ago versus a person they've become today. How does that change happen? With knowledge and acting upon knowledge. So those characteristics we're supposed to have, we learn it where? In the Quran. We act upon it, we adorn ourselves with it. We now become a walking image of the characteristics that have been mentioned. Now, the first characteristic that we're warned against in the Quran is kibr. Who had kibr? Iblis. What was the impact of having that characteristic? That's the result. I say the impact on him as an individual. What that characteristic impact on him as an individual? Rejection. Not fulfilling commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Disobedience. What was the characteristic that caused this? Al-kibr. We are only aware of one command that was asked of Iblis that he rejected. And that was what? To prostrate to who? Adam alayhi salam. What do we learn from that situation? Similar thing about the ummiyun, those who speak about Islam without any knowledge. Iblis from himself, not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from himself said, I am better than Adam. He made his own personal analogy. He used his own calculations as to why he was better than Adam. He looked at Adam, pondered over him and said, yeah, I'm better than this one. Because of something that was restricted to his dhann, his assumption. Did it precede revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did Allah give him this knowledge? No. So when Allah told him to prostrate, as he addressed all of the malaika, Iblis was among those being addressed. All of the malaika prostrated. Why? Because they then got knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the virtue of Adam. In what situation? We've already mentioned it. In which situation did they gain knowledge of Adam's virtue, alayhi salatu wasalam? It's significant for us today. We have to know this. To name the names of things. And they couldn't do it. Why couldn't they do it? They didn't have knowledge of it. Who gave them the knowledge? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what did they say? قَالُوا سُبْحَانَكَ لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا إِلَّا مَا عَلَّمْتَنَا. They said, glory be to you, that we have no knowledge except that which you have taught us. You see? But what did Allah do? عَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. Allah taught Adam all of those names. All of those names Allah taught Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. So when he's addressing, because remember before the angels asked Allah, why are you creating someone who, just like history repeats itself, we already saw what happened with the jinn. It led to bloodshed and war. They feared the same thing will happen among mankind. They didn't challenge Allah as well. They were saying, there's going to be bloodshed again. Allah says, I know that which you don't know. So what was the virtue restricted to? Ilm, knowledge. Knowledge is either going to raise a person or going to humiliate them. It goes that way. Either it's going to be a source of your virtue or a source of your humiliation, your downfall. Especially in today's time when we have people who portray to be a person of knowledge, but then they say things that contradict that which Allah and the Messenger ﷺ has said. Then this becomes a what? A downfall. This becomes a person's downfall. But whoever learns what Allah has said and what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said and understands it just as the Sahaba understood it, then this is going to what? Elevate this person. I was listening to one sheikh and he asked a question and he said, I'll give you, I think it was 100 dinar or something like this. Who can name a billionaire or a millionaire from the time of Bukhari? Do you know any millionaires from the time of Bukhari? But you know scholars of hadith, right? You know ulama from their time, but would you know any of the millionaires? Millionaires are only known for those who are alive. Once the people die, they're dead too. Like even, for example, our grandparents' time, the millionaires of their time, we don't know who they are. But if we work out the dates, we can find some scholars though. You see? There are things that are temporary elevation. And just as this life is temporary, that elevation is what? Temporary. But there are things that will venerate a person for eternity. There is not one millionaire from the kuffar more famous than Bukhari. For us, Bukhari is a different kind of heir. That's the reality. You know the heir that they say, the inheritance heir. He inherited knowledge. That's the most precious thing that can be inherited. And because of that, he has been honored for his sincerity and his effort until when? Yawm al-Qiyamah. The Yahud, we don't know them by name, but those from the time of Musa والسلام, who did these actions, we know of them as a group for being humiliated because of their transgressions with knowledge, and they're playing with knowledge. But in the same one, Khidr, at the time of Musa والسلام, we know him and we're aware of him. Why? What is the distinguishing feature that he had? Why is he known to us? Because of knowledge. He was honored and venerated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of knowledge. Musa والسلام, was only sent to him to attain knowledge, nothing else. Not money, not a house, not dinner, knowledge. And when we see there's an ongoing pattern, the virtue of knowledge is constant within the Quran. Because the Quran is a primary source of knowledge. Because Bashirna, ma huwa al-ilm? What is knowledge? That's it. Ma'rifatul haqq bidalilihi. Knowing the truth with evidence. For us, what is evidence? قال الله وقال الرسول وأجمع عليه الأمة الإجماع وما يقاس على كتاب الله وسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. That which is done based upon analogy according to the Quran and the Sunnah in contemporary issues. This is knowledge. This is the knowledge that will honor a person in this life and in the hereafter. So if you want to be of those who are remembered honorably with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have to attain knowledge for whose sake alone? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you attain knowledge to be a TikTok sheikh, then you'll be a TikTok sheikh. And you'll be remembered on TikTok. And when Yawm al-Qiyamah comes and TikTok goes, then you also go. But if you are a person who pursues knowledge to gain closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon clarity, then you shall bear the fruits of that in this life and in the hereafter. فنسأل الله أن يجعلنا من المخلصين ومن أئمة للمتقين اللهم آمين ونكتفي بهذا القدر. اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا وحبيب محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.